In 1974, Mel Brooks spent $2.8 million in Young Frankenstein, yet one sequence nearly ruined the whole film. They had to reshoot the same shot 15 times, because Marty Feldman nibbled Maline Khan's mink wrap while they were filming. The actors were giggling uncontrollably. Since the fur was all over the place and the damage was so costly, Brooks made a choice that took everyone by surprise. He cut the entire thing at 00:30. That footage remained hidden for 40 years. People recognized this wasn't just a blooper when it eventually came to light in 2014. That was the point at which a classic nearly descended into anarchy. It wasn't one day that Gene Wilder decided to compose a parody. He began watching the old Frankenstein movies at 2:00 p.m. in the winter of 1973, while he was residing in West Hampton, New York, daily. After the credits rolled, the emotion lingered in him. In order to develop this notion of Victor Frankenstein's anxious great-grandson, returning to Transylvania not to mock the classics, but to pay tribute to them, he took a yellow legal pad and started composing the music, first few pages. Everything was shaped by that decision. Instead of being a joke that makes people laugh, he wanted the film to evoke the atmosphere of the early Universal horror movies. He later claimed that the initial scenes he created, particularly the encounter between Dr. Frankenstein and Igor at the train station, remained almost unaltered, as if the tale had just fallen into his lap and he needed to seize it. Love for an idea is one thing, but making it into a movie is quite another. So real life intervened. Wilder brought the dream to Mel Brooks while he was working on Blazing Saddles in 1974, and in the most bizarre way imaginable, he made it official. As a symbolic down payment, he gave Brooks 50 Satani toddlers in cash, so that he could co-write the screenplay and direct. When Brooks inquired about Wilder's financial situation, he merely produced his wallet and handed him the 50 cm hulls. Later on, Brooks regarded it as if the collaboration had just started. The nights became routine after that. While working slowly over Earl Grey tea and digestive biscuits at Wilder's Hotel Bear Bungalow, they would alternate scenes until the humor seemed sharp and the world, music, still felt real. The cast was able to come together thanks to the same kind of fortunate timing. And it wasn't only that we enjoyed these people's music. It was a series of minor details coming together. Peter Boll and Marty Feldman were simultaneously handled by Wilder's agency, Mike Medavoy. Additionally, Medavoy called Brooks to inquire whether he had a project for all three actors, when Wilder began writing the script. As soon as he heard that, Wilder's mind began to visualize faces. Feldman was ideal for Igor, and Boll's ability to be both frightening and compassionate at the same time was crucial, because the monster required both danger and pain to coexist in one body. The jokes become as bizarre as the details. Boyle spent 5 hours a day doing cosmetics. In essence, Feldman's hump was a pregnancy cushion that was crammed into his outfit. Even the pieces that didn't look correct turned out to be the proper ones. Additionally, the film began to feel as though it was picking its own characters. The largest dispute, however, had nothing to do with a joke. It has to do with respect. Black and white was required, because Brooks and Wilder intended this to resemble the 1930s horror movies, particularly James Whale's 1931 Frankenstein. The notion did not sit well with the studios. Columbia Pictures wanted color and was concerned about the budget, but Brooks would not compromise. After Columbia withdrew, 20th Century Fox's Alan Ladd Jr. took over and approved the $2.4 million budget and the black and white aesthetic. They then fully committed to the tribute. Dale Hennessy, the production designer, made an effort to adhere to the traditional aesthetic. He even assisted in locating vintage lab equipment from effects designer Kenneth Strickfed, connected to the 1931 movie at 04:37. The objective was straightforward. As you are already standing in the shadows, create the illusion that you are within that universe and then allow the laughter to hit you. And the individuals within those pieces began to become legendary as the pieces locked in. Feldman was anxious during tryouts because it was his first time in Hollywood, but Wilder had him in mind from the beginning. Because of his peculiar energy, which made Igor feel alive, Wilder thereafter referred to him as the production's heart and soul. Improvisation led to the iconic Walk This Way moment with the cane and limp, which became a defining humor. The crew leaned into his protruding eyes, which were caused by a thyroid ailment, to make him even more memorable, and they packed his knees with tissues to give them a knobby appearance. Feldman played their beat like he was Stan Laurel, and Wilder was Oliver Hardy, according to Wilder. who even compared them to a famous comic duo. Feldman relaxed as he leaned into it. He was characterized by the part by the end, and he even received a Saturn Award for it. Terry Garr's story followed a different path, but nevertheless had the same obstinate structure. Brooks informed her that Maleen Khan was his top pick when she first auditioned for Elizabeth, the fiancée. Gar had the option to leave at that point, but Wilder encouraged her to return the following day to read for Inga. At the time, she was working on the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, and she gave the second chance her full attention. She labored with a German wig stylist, sculpted her accent, and even used socks in her bra to accentuate her physique. Brooks immediately cast her since the audition was so intense. Then she said things like, "Would you like to have a role in J?" with such assurance that people continue to quote it as if it were true. There were roots to even the unexpected. Gene Hackman was renowned for his theatrical work. However, he played tennis with Wilder, with whom he was pals. Hackman so requested a minor role. The Blind Hermit was the only remaining portion, and he was given it. Because Hackman played it straight and allowed the turmoil to unfold around him, the outcome, despite sounding like a reckless risk, became one of the funniest scenes in the movie. He nearly vanished beneath his enormous beard, and although the role went uncredited, it was unforgettable. Bowl, meantime, paid for his part with skin and patience. William Tuttle applied harsh makeup for up to 5 hours per day, which was exacerbated by the heat from the studio lights. 6 inches was added by his platform boots. The monster was both frightened and lonely, because of the youthful gentleness he still brought. His skin could blister from the intensive process. However, he remained devoted because the emotional reality, rather than solace, was what mattered. Frausser felt like a storm in human form, while Cloris Leachman, from the opposite side of the house, pushed the same concept. The comedy was sharper because she played it dead serious. Mel Brooks' mother, who was German and on set, served as an inspiration for her accent, which was fixed from the beginning. To make her appear older and more menacing, William Tuttle implanted a massive mole. With horses winning, the term blueser became a running joke, and Leachman's influence turned that straightforward joke into a curse. She demonstrated that she could be frightening, humorous, and bizarre without ever winking at the audience, and her work was so good that she was nominated for a Golden Globe. And because Wilder and Brooks battled to preserve the tone, that section is significant. They wrote a lot. For hours they quarreled about minor adjustments, occasionally yelling and pacing. Additionally, Brooks claimed that they nearly got into a fistfight. Wilder even recalled a blow-up in which Brooks stormed out and called back 10 minutes later, yelling, "You should never let insane people into your house. Who was that madman?" It sounds crazy, but there was a reason for it. Every scene was being squeezed till it worked. The put-in on the Ritz number nearly didn't exist because of this. Wilder intended Dr. Frankenstein to use a top hat and storytelling routine to introduce the monster to upper society. After reading it, Brooks lost it. In Top Hat and Tales with the Monster, you tap dance to Irving Berlin. Are you insane? Red-faced. Wilder battled for 20 minutes without letting go. The sequence ruined the test when Brooks finally consented to shoot it as a test, declaring, "If one person says it's silly or stupid, it's out." It remained. Brooks later acknowledged, "I have never been so wrong in my life." The song debuted on December 15, 1974, and it became one of the first moments people remembered, because, despite its absurdity, it was a part of that universe. Additionally, Wilder drew a line that startled Brooks at 10:18. Because he was afraid Brooks would break the fourth wall and throw off the balance. He did not want Brooks to appear in the movie. Brooks pushed back, recalling Wilder stating, "I don't want to break the fourth wall." Hold on a second, am I really that awful? He was not insulted by Wilder's, he just described the concern. "You're not horrible, but you constantly violate the fourth wall. You'll be wearing a coat of armor, I fear. Flip up the visor and say, 'Hiya, folks.'" As a result, Brooks remained off-screen, even though he managed to gain access through voice, acting as a werewolf, and Victor Frankenstein. If the appearance had not been as good as the promise, everything would have fallen apart. Because color movies were popular at the time, Brooks insisted on black and white in 1974, despite concerns that viewers would reject it. Brooks wanted the precise feel of the classic Universal movies, but even the cinematographer Gerald Hirschfeld first objected. They then went into more detail. Like a time machine integrated into the edit, they employed opening credits, iris outs, wipes and fades to black in the style of the 1930s. John Morris, the composer, created a score that felt authentic to the time period, alternating between melodies that seemed like they belonged in that age and eerie horror chords. They pursued the actual thing for the lab. For more than 40 years, Kenneth Strick-Feeden had stored the outdated electrical equipment in his garage in Santa Monica. They were astounded to see that it continued to function. Out of deference, Brooks demanded $12,500, though he offered to rent it for $1. Strick-Feeden's changing traveling arc, which threw sparks as if the past still existed, served as the focal point. Things were already informal and lighthearted on the set of Young Frankenstein when it was filmed in late 1973. However, one instance sent everyone over the edge. Marty Feldman made the unexpected decision to do something during Elizabeth's grand arrival into the castle. He abruptly leaned in and bit Maline Khan's mink fur wrap while he was playing Igor. It wasn't organized. It wasn't discussed. It simply occurred. White mink hairs sprang into the air at 12:49, and several of them lodged directly in Feldman's mouth. He spat fur out like chewing gum as he repeatedly had to quit trying to continue. He bit it, and each time Maline Khan screamed. The entire cast burst out laughing as Gene Wilder became frightened. No one was able to breathe. Nobody was able to concentrate. What should have been a brief sequence devolved into complete mayhem, and the team shot it almost 15 times more than any other scene in the movie. Mel Brooks eventually had to halt all filming in order to give everyone time to recuperate, because the laughter would not stop. Nevertheless, despite all that happiness, the sequence was never used in the finished film. Mel Brooks tested the movie at 13:42, but viewers laughed too loudly and too early. The response disrupted the parody's rhythm and diverted focus from what was supposed to happen later, particularly the well-known putting on the Ritz passage. Brooks was concerned that the accumulation of everything else would be undermined by a single outrageous joke. He sliced off the entire mink bite, leaving only a glimpse of Feldman's twisted smile. The insanity persisted, albeit in a more subdued form. The entire video was kept secret for years, appearing only in sporadic deleted scene collections and behind-the-scenes films. The fact that Gene Wilder later acknowledged that this one act of improvisation caused more delays than any other aspect of the production demonstrated how brittle even a comedy set can be. The fact that wasn't innocuous contributed to the moment's stunning nature. In 1973, Maline Khan's mink wrap cost $50, or roughly $325 no. In fact, Feldman broke it, scattering pricey hairs all over the set. Khan then made a joke about it, telling him that although those were actual minks, there was still work to be done and nerves to calm down. It demonstrated how a single snap decision might have a cascading effect on a whole production, requiring retakes, costume adjustments, and a difficult choice on the part of the director to preserve the film's coherence. Gene Wilder himself exhibited the same conflict between instinct and control. He sported a scrawny old Hollywood mustache that wasn't in the script when he first showed up on set as Dr. Frankenstein. Mel Brooks initially did not like it. It did not fit the mental picture he had. However, Wilder was so adamant about it that he shot important scenes twice, once with and once without the mustache. Brooks had second thoughts after watching the video. Gann has never looked more attractive in the part, he later wrote. What began as a low-key argument became a distinguishing characteristic of the character, a minor detail that gave the performance charm and a hint of vintage elegance. The picture continued to be shaped by improvisation in surprising ways. The blind hermit, played by Gene Hackman, was supposed to be a short and straightforward part. Nevertheless, Hackman requested permission to test out certain concepts. He abruptly made the remark about brewing espresso during the scene, which was entirely out of date for the era of the movie. Laughter erupted on the set. Brooks was immediately enamored and retained it. Almost as if the movie itself is unable to take the joke, the scene immediately goes to darkness. That one sentence turned into one of the most memorable moments, demonstrating that sometimes the most hilarious thing is the item that shouldn't be there in the first place. Some actors endured in silence, while others performed openly. To become the monster, Peter Boal spent hours every day buried under layers of prosthetics. Under intense studio lighting, the makeup procedure took around 4 hours, trapping heat and adhesive against his flesh. His face frequently felt like it was scorching by the conclusion of shooting days. The makeup itself seemed to be melting at moments. To keep him safe, special effects teams even made fiberglass music cast for the riskiest situations. Boal persevered despite the agony and exhaustion, creating a monster that was strangely human and horrifying at the same time. Then Marty Feldman reappeared, bringing more turmoil in smaller doses. There was no script for Igor's wandering hump. In between scenes, Feldman just began shifting it from side to side. It was on the left one instant, and the right the next. When the crew saw, they chuckled. Wilder and Brooks embraced the joke and enjoyed it. That changing hump evolved into a subdued visual joke that rewarded focused viewers and encapsulated the essence of the entire show. Some of Mel Brooks's outrageous musical ideas for Young Frankenstein had the potential to completely alter the film in an instant. He allegedly threw forth a joke one day that, although amusing on paper, was hazardous in practice. As an imitation of Cary Grant, he proposed that Frankenstein's monster say his first words. It was the type of humor that would strike quickly and forcefully, then immediately swallow the mood. When Gene Wilder heard it, he remained composed. He contributed to the writing. He took the lead. Additionally, he was using his life to defend the tone of, so he did something subtle and cunning. As though he adored the concept, he feigned to write it down. However, he secretly hoped Brooks would forget it. Brooks did in some way forget it. That brief moment conveys a lot. Brooks was a huge fan of edge-pushing comedy. Wilder wanted the jokes to be part of the narrative, without detracting from its impact. The moment he opened his mouth, he did not want the monster to turn into a cartoon. His first goal was for the monster to feel human. That decision was significant, since it allowed for scenes in which the monster's speech simultaneously comes off as amusing and somehow poignant, including the well-known statement, "I'm monster." Once you understand that, you begin to perceive the entire set as a location where equilibrium was constantly in jeopardy. It was a deliberate spoof of traditional horror, but it was also a comedy, and even a tiny change could make it completely ridiculous. Brooks would exert pressure. Wilder would retract it. The movie would then hit that golden place once more. Nevertheless, the set itself did not always behave, even when the tone remained under control. The scene with Marty Feldman and Maline Khan biting the mink was one of the most talked about. It was already funny on camera. It descended into true mayhem behind the scenes. Feldman bit the mink wrap repeatedly, causing fur to get into his mouth each time. Then the laughter began. Not courteous laughter, the kind that hurts your face and ruins a take. According to reports, they had to reshoot it up to 15 times, because the actors kept laughing. The issue was that each additional take had a price. The mink wrap was more than simply a prop, it was money, and those were pricey period clothes. According to reports, the $50 wrap did not withstand repeated biting. The more it occurred, the more the costume was harmed, and the more hastily the production had to adjust. The laughing poured into other times as time passed, and energy declined. The crew had to repeatedly reset the scene and clear up the mess. That blooper ended up becoming legendary, but it was also too much to include in the finished movie. It was the kind of scene that could cause viewers to lose interest in the film. Subsequently, the project experienced a completely different twist: casting. In the original cast, Maline Khan played the endearing lab assistant Aninga. Then, at the last minute, the plan was altered, and she was cast as Elizabeth instead. All of a sudden, everything had to change. Terry Garr was cast in the role after Inga had to be recast. Khan had to make adjustments in the interim, and the production had to follow suit. This required changes to the script. New wardrobe fittings were required. Pressure was involved. And that all took place in the days leading up to filming, when there was little time for rest. However, something sparked when Khan entered Elizabeth. In a single beat, her performance's sophisticated dramatic manner could transform into comedy. Important moments, such as the well-known, "Oh, sweet mystery of life" passage, were formed by the changeover. Khan's Elizabeth became one of those characters that people remember for decades. So it was a risk that paid off. Gene Wilder was in the middle of it all, attempting to transform his on-screen enthusiasm into something different. He was already well known as Willy Wonka, a dreamy and lighthearted character who seemed to float over scenes with an odd shine. However, Dr. Frankenstein needed an alternative engine. He needed to be both anxious enough to pull off the comedy and serious enough to fit into an old monster movie. Brooks initially tended to choose a larger, more comprehensive version of the scientist. Wilder pushed for a more regulated system. Not silent, not flat, but more authentic. Small decisions, gestures, and a cautious voice that might abruptly shift from pride to panic were how he developed the character. Later, Brooks acknowledged that Wilder's strategy became the film's core, since it kept the plot realistic, even as the gags became ridiculous. The danger became apparent due to the strength of the cast. The movie might start to feel disorganized if they allowed the set to become a place of constant laughter. Naturally, the world attempts to replicate something in many ways if it gets that beloved. Mel Brooks and Susan Stroman co-directed the Broadway adaptation of Young Frankenstein, which debuted in 2007. Despite its genuine attempt, the show had a serious flaw from the start. The initial cast a shadow that was difficult to shake. Dr. Frankenstein by Gene Wilders, Igor by Marty Feldman, and Frau Blücher by Cloris Leachman. It was difficult to replicate those performances. Even though the musical received mixed reviews during its roughly one-year run, it proved its point. The narrative was still compelling. Even when it became impossible to ignore the ghosts of the original, people still desired it. And now, following all that time, there's one more odd turn that maintains the film's uniqueness. Young Frankenstein is still difficult to find on streaming services in many places, so collectors frequently have to rely on DVDs, Blu-rays, or special screenings. Its folklore is further compounded by its scarcity. A film that nearly descended into pandemonium. A film that nearly went too wide. A film that might have made the monster lose its heart and become a passing impression. Rather, it remained intelligent, remained human, and somehow managed to become a national treasure and a classic comedy.